Now I got a little thing that says live.
Yes, we are live, guys. Finally, sorry guys for being a little late. Tech issues, but we are happy that we have Greg Weisman on. We are very super excited to talk about Star Wars, everything, and I see that you guys are already getting questions, which we're very happy to see. So let's get started. First, of course, I'm going to introduce the guest of honor, which is Greg Weisman. So tell us a little bit about Star Wars. Star Wars Kanan is coming out next Wednesday, well, this Wednesday. So tell us a little bit about it.
Star Wars Kanan is or more specifically, Star Wars Kanan, The Last Padawan, is a 5-issue arc that basically tells part of the character of Kanan Jarrus, tells part of his backstory. Kanan, of course, is one of the leads of Star Wars Rebels, and this miniseries gives you a nice, significant chunk of information about how he came to be the guy he is.
Awesome. And now, forgot to introduce my co-host Jay. So Jay, you are a huge Star Wars fan. You caught up with the whole season 1 of Star Wars Rebels in a couple of days. So tell us about your Star Wars fandom in a way, I guess.
Episode 4. I started from way back in episode 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, Clone Wars, the animated series, the books, Star Wars Rebels. I did watch the whole series as it was airing, but the last 3 episodes, things got complicated, got a lot of stuff to do, didn't have time to watch it. Rewatched the whole series this week so I could get it fresh in my head. So great to have Greg Weisman, the creator of season 1, on.
Well, I wouldn't call myself the creator. I was one of 3 executive producers of the show in season 1 with Dave Filoni and Simon Kinberg. And Dave and Simon and Carrie Beck created the show. I came aboard after it was already created.
Cool. So we just want to say that, guys, the people who are watching us, you guys can ask questions too. Me and Jay, we have some prepared questions, and we're going to mix your questions as we go along. So we're very excited to hear your questions, which I'm already copying and pasting. We had some from Twitter, so I'm going to get those too. But first I'm going to go to Jay. What question do you have for Greg?
All right, what is the premise of this, your story arc? What's the premise of it?
You talking about in the comic?
Yeah, Star Wars, Kanan, The Last Padawan.
This is a flashback to when Kanan was a Padawan. It opens in issue 1, literally a day before Order 66 comes down. For those of your audience, and I can't imagine there are many of them, but for those in your audience who don't know what Order 66 is, that was the order that the soon-to-be Emperor sent out to all the clone troopers, basically declaring the Jedi traitors and ordering all of them to be executed. And so Kanan opens about, 18 hours before that order came down. And that's issue 1. Issue 2 is basically Order 66, and then 3, 4, and 5 are about how Kanan survives that. And in fact, he's not Kanan yet. He's, his real name is Caleb Doom, and that's so we're really meeting the pre-Kanan Kanan.
Awesome. Go on, Jay.
Will we see him go from Caleb to Kanan, or is it just a part of his journey to becoming Kanan?
It's definitely. I don't want to give any spoilers away, but it's definitely only part of his journey. It's not the whole journey. The whole 5 issues covers about 6 to 8 months of his life total. And it was never meant to be this sort of comprehensive, everything you needed to know about Kanan is going to be stuffed into 5 issues. We're not going to do that, obviously. But it's a significant story. It's an important story. We've got artwork by Pepe Larraz and colors by Dave Curiel. The artwork is gorgeous. I mean, truly gorgeous. Some of you have probably seen the preview pages. And I'm thrilled with how the book is turning out. I finished writing issue 5 this past Sunday. Pepe is currently penciling and inking issue 3. Dave is coloring issue 2. So, there's a bit of a delay time here, but, the thing is progressing. We're all good, and it's very exciting.
That is great. So my question for you, I'm going to ask probably 2 questions, then we're going to get into some fan questions, and we're going to mix up fan questions, art questions. It'll be fun. So my question is, how did Marvel approach you for this? Was it because you were working on the show, or did you pitch the idea? How did this all work out?
Well, it was Lucasfilm actually that contacted me first and asked me if I wanted to do it, which I very much did. They had the basic notion of story they wanted to do for the first Kanan arc, and it was all stuff that Simon and Dave and the Lucasfilm Story Group and I had discussed when I first came aboard the show. When I started on Star Wars Rebels as a producer and story editor and writer, they had already created all the lead characters, but they didn't all have backstories yet, or at least not detailed ones. So one of the first things that we did once I came aboard, among other things, is we came up with last names for all the characters, because most of them did not have last names yet. We also started, going into the backstories, because my point was that even if we didn't reveal these backstories in the first season, we needed to know what they were. We needed to be able to tell our actors what their backstories were, So we knew what the basic backstory of Kanan was, and so they said, "Hey, you want to do this comic?" I was like, "Yeah, I definitely do," and so we did. I got on the phone with them. We talked through what they were looking to accomplish in it. I wrote up a short proposal, maybe 2.5 pages, like half a page per issue kind of thing. We went back and forth on that a little bit, and then I got to write.
That's awesome. And you obviously wrote a tie-in for Young Justice. Is this feel similar to you, like the tie-in you wrote for Young Justice, or is it completely different because it is a prequel to a show that you worked on?
Well, on Young Justice, I had a lot more freedom on the comic because I was head of story, in essence, me and Brandon Vietti. So, I decided what stories we were going to tell in that book, and so we told some flashback stuff, and we told some stuff that intertwined with the series, and we jumped ahead, and we did stuff in between, and if the comic had kept going, we would have kept doing that kind of stuff. On Rebels, it's very much, since the story group's sort of taken over, we want everything to be in continuity, or rather they do. They've sort of now set aside Star Wars Legends to take care of the expanded universe, but now everything new that's coming out is going to be in continuity, and I'm not working on season 2 of Rebels. I've moved on to other things, so I needed them to keep me up to date on what was going on in Rebels, so that nothing I did in the comic contradicted things that were coming later. But the basics of the prequel, this was again a story that Simon and Dave and the story group and the writers we came up with way back a year ago, when we started working on the show. So we were all pretty clear on what the, not every single detail, but what all the basics were for this important piece of Kanan's life.
Awesome. So I'm gonna pass.
I did come up with the title, "The Last Padawan." I was proud of that one.
How did you come up with it? How did you come up with the of the title? How did that come to your mind?
It just, you know, most, you know, if you've seen episode 3, obviously, nearly every Padawan is murdered, and so here's the last one, the one that didn't, the one that got away, in essence.
There you go. It's already getting me very excited to read this book. I'm very excited for Wednesday. So I'm going to pass along to Jay to get some of those viewer questions going on. We'll answer about 3, and then we'll go back to our questions, and we're going to do that. So Jay, what do we got so far?
Alan Mullins asks, "What's it like having your own comic book?" I would actually add on to that and say again, because you had Injustice and Gargoyles and Bad Guys. Gargoyles, Bad Guys.
Well, yeah, and I had Captain Atom back before probably most of your viewers were born. You know, it's great. You know, it's terrific, and the thing that's really terrific is I've got Jordan White is the editor on the book, and he's been a lot of fun to work with. And Pepe, really, his art is so beautiful. I just feel, this sounds like hyperbole, but I really feel blessed to have him on the book because he's taking everything that I do and making it look 10 times better. You know, with all these things, it's very much, you know, these are important franchises. Young Justice, you know, I wrote an issue of Spider-Man, Amazing Spider-Man, that was a lot of fun to do. None of these are mine, so I just try to be a good custodian, you know, not, there's a big element of don't screw it up, Greg, you know, when you write on someone else's stuff. You know, I have done comics that I owned, or at least owned partially, like I did Machination for 8 Comics a few years ago. And that was one that I co-owned with a couple partners, Vic Cook and Greg Guler. And, you know, there's obviously a lot more freedom on that because it's ours. But, you know, I love Star Wars just like I love the DC Comics heroes and I love the Marvel Comics heroes. And it's always a thrill to play in those playgrounds. But I don't consider them my own. I think that'd be overstating it.
Awesome. So what else do we have, Jay?
Sarah Robertson asks, how did you keep the continuity with what we know of Kanan from Star Wars Rebels and the New Dawn to what you wrote in this comic?
Well, I mean, obviously I worked on the first season of Rebels, so I was very familiar with Kanan from that. I actually, while we were doing the first season of Rebels, John Jackson Miller submitted his proposal for New Dawn. So Simon and Dave and I all gave John feedback on that, so that, and because John feels the same way about his book, I'm sure, I don't want to speak for him, but I have talked to him before, so I'm sure he feels the same way about his book as I feel about this comic. You don't want to screw it up. You know, you want to make sure that all these things are in continuity. So we gave him advice on Kanan and Hera for that book. And then obviously once the book was written, I read it. And so I read the scenes of Kanan at the temple on Coruscant and made sure that that again, by talking to Lucasfilm people, that I wasn't, you know, any changes that had been made in season 1 after I'd left or season 2, that I wasn't messing that up, and I just tried to be consistent. This miniseries is set, you know, after that flashback in A New Dawn when Kanan's at the temple, but before the rest of New Dawn when Kanan meets Hera for the first time. So it's in the middle between those things, closer to the flashback than to the bulk of the book. And then obviously the Rebels series comes after New Dawn is over. So, you know, we are trying to get all that straight, and that's really the Lucasfilm Story Group's job, to make sure that all the writers they've got working on all these various projects are all being consistent with it. They do a great job at bird dogging that. But it's also about the writers, every single one of us, I'm sure, feel strongly that we don't want to mess it up. We want to get it right. I feel like I've got a good sense of who the Kanan character is from working on Rebels, from working with Dave, Simon, and in particular Freddie Prinze Jr., who plays Kanan, who's a great guy and loves the character. I want to do justice to it. So for me, it's about extrapolating backward and sort of figuring out, okay, that's great. We know who he is. Who was he?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the game.
That's great. So Jay, do we have another question?
Yeah.
I have to say, I feel like this camera's really making me look fat.
No, honestly, I love your camera.
I feel like all I see on this thing
definition
is
camera
my
right
gut.
now.
All I'm seeing is my gut. It's very disconcerting.
No.
When I first saw your camera too, I'm like, your camera is so.
We actually see up to here. We actually see right here. This is what we're seeing of you.
You're seeing what?
We're seeing like up to here.
We're seeing.
Yeah, because I just slid up back
like
here.
Mid chest.
I slid up because I was tired of looking at my stomach.
Well, whatever makes you feel comfortable.
Enough of my vanity. That's fine. We can move on.
So Jay, what other questions do we have?
Mr. J's Comic Reviews, Jeremy asks, "Hey, Kat, Jay, and Mr. Weisman, I love your work. I followed every series you've been on and loved every single one of them. I'm a huge fan. I also read your novel, by the way. It was awesome. Can we expect more prose work from you in the near future?"
Well, it sounds like he read my first. It sounds like he read my first novel, Reign of the Ghosts. Hold on. Got him right here. Here's Reign of the Ghosts.
Awesome.
You see it?
Yes.
And I've written the second novel in the same series. It's called Spirits of Ash and Foam. Can you see that?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm very proud of both these books. I very much want to. It's in theory a 9-book series. I've plotted out 9 books worth. And I'm doing the research on book 3. But the truth is that the sales on the first 2 books weren't everything that St. Martin's Press, who publishes them, were hoping for. So they haven't ordered the 3rd book yet. They haven't said no, but they haven't said yes either. So, anything that your viewers, your audience can do to, they're available on ebook, they're available as paperbacks, and you can get them on Amazon. You can get them at any bookstore if they don't literally have them on the shelf when you walk in the door. You can go to the front desk and order them. Any bookstore can order them for you. I just need to really bring the sales up of these books so that St. Martin's orders the 3rd book.
You know what? I have not read the book yet, and I'm going to go on Amazon tonight and buy it. I know Jay's a reader also, so maybe after me and Jay read both books, we can invite you over again and talk about them, because we'd love to do that. I love all your work. So
I would love to do that, believe me. Believe me. But yeah, there's 2 books. So your question asker who asked about, will there be another book? There already is. So I hope, again, that people will pick up both books. I'm really proud of them. For those of you who don't know, Reign of the Ghosts is a story of a 13-year-old girl named Rain Cacique who lives on a chain of Caribbean islands called the Ghost Keys. Rain's parents own a bed and breakfast, and even at age 13, Rain already has jobs that include making beds for tourists and serving them breakfast every morning. She cuts bait on her father's charter boat, and she feels like her life is very contained on these 8 islands and very inescapable, and she feels kind of trapped. And she's living in a tropical paradise, but she doesn't see it that way because it's the only world she ever knew. And to her, tourists are just people who come in and out of her life and literally come and live in her home.
Mm-hmm.
And then she discovers partway through the book that she has the ability to see and communicate with the dead. She finds out she's got a mystery to solve. She finds out she's got a mission to accomplish and a destiny to fulfill. And it's, a long game series, so if you like my work on Star Wars Rebels or on Gargoyles in particular or Young Justice. It's that kind of plotting, that kind of storytelling. Lots of characters, starting with Rain, but in the second book we've got a vampire and a mermaid in it, but because these are based on the mythology of the Taino people, who were the indigenous inhabitants of the Caribbean before Columbus showed up, this is a great rich mythology that's as rich as Greek mythology or Norse mythology or Egyptian mythology, and yet no one knows these stories, at least not from a pop culture standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's that kind of rich storytelling. And I really, again, if you like my previous work, I really do think people will like these books, and I'm really proud of them. And so, I hope people go for it.
Yeah, it sounds really interesting, guys. Go buy the book. I know tonight I'm gonna go on Amazon, buy them, 'cause it sounds really, really cool. I know from the description, it sounds like Jay would love these books. Like everything you just said, it's like everything he likes. Norse, mythology,
mythology. That's like you wrote that book for me, didn't you? Just admit it.
I mostly wrote it for me, but yeah, if you like my sensibility, you're gonna like these books.
That's great.
Oh yeah, love Gargoyles. Like right up here, Gargoyles is one of my favorite all-time ever stories.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mine too.
Kat, you have a question?
What, Jay?
I said, do you have a question?
Yes. So my question is, have you always been a Star Wars fan? Has it been something that you grew up with, or is it because you're going on to this project, you like binge watch Star Wars? Like how did that all come about? Like I guess your fandom of Star Wars.
Well, I was 13 years old in 1976, and yes, if anyone's doing the math, that means I'm really old. But when Star Wars came out, it was not called A New Hope back then. It was just Star Wars, and I begged my mom to take me to see it the first day it opened. We went to a matinee in Westwood. I have a very clear memory of waiting in a very long line and being very nervous that we wouldn't get in, but we did get in. And seeing that movie and just being blown away. And then seeing Empire Strikes Back and loving that even more a few years later, 3 years later, or 2 years later, I guess. So, I've been a Star Wars fan literally from the beginning. And yeah, I mean, when I got the gig on Rebels, I went back and binge watched all 6 movies. It's not like I hadn't seen them before, but I, watched them again. I wanted them fresh in my mind. And hadn't seen a lot of Clone Wars. Had seen a few episodes here or there, but started watching Clone Wars. And then dove into the work itself.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, for me, I've not seen every Star Wars movie, and I feel so bad. And then right now, episode 7 is going to be coming up, so I am going to watch every Star Wars movie. So I'm very excited about that.
I'm actually making her watch it. I'm making her watch it on stream. She's going to be watching it and doing commentary on here every month leading up to episode 7. So I'm making her watch it.
Look forward to that. So my next question is, you've worked on so many franchises. You've worked on, DC stuff, Spider-Man, Star Wars. I mean, the list goes on. Is there a franchise you haven't tackled that you would really like to tackle in the future?
I don't know. I mean, I love the Buffyverse. I mean, really love it. And so, I'm just blue skying here. Is, if Joss Whedon, who I've never met, but who I admire a great deal, knocked on my door and said, "Hey, we want to do something in the Buffyverse. Would you like to participate?" I'd be like, "Yes, please." But I love DC heroes. I love Marvel heroes. I'd love to do stuff with them again. It's been so much fun working on Rebels and on Kanan, and I'd be happy to do more in the Star Wars franchise. I've never worked in Star Trek. I've worked with a lot of Star Trek people, but I've never actually worked in Star Trek myself, and I'd love to do that. the list is probably endless on some level, but you know, and I'm actually employed on a project now that I'm not allowed to talk about yet, but it's pretty cool. And but I'm sure there are others that I'm just blanking out on. If you named a franchise, the odds are I'd want to work on it. You know, you know, I was a huge Space Ghost fan. Herculoids, I love Herculoids. I'd love to do Herculoids. There's probably more, but that's probably enough.
Awesome. And whenever that new project comes out, we're very excited to hear what that's all about. And I'm sure on Comic Frontline we'll be covering it somehow. So Jay, what questions do you have?
All right. When you mentioned about Star Wars Kanan, you said it was an arc. Now, some of the solicitations make it sound like it's going to be more than just your 5 issues or 5 issues. Is it going to continue as Star Wars Kanan, or will it be like something different? Each one would have, you know, like their own subtitle, like Star Wars Kanan, blah blah blah, or will it just be Star Wars Kanan after your first arc?
I don't want to pretend I know stuff I don't know. So
Okay.
as far as I know, the book is ongoing, but each arc, as I understand it, you know, may jump around to different eras. So my era is basically the Order 66 Episode 3 era. They might do another arc set, you know, even before that, you know, when he was, you know, earlier in the Clone Wars, or when he was at the Temple on Coruscant. They might do arcs after it, closer to New Dawn, or in between New Dawn and when we first meet Kanan in Spark of Rebellion. My understanding is they plan to jump around, and I may be back doing another arc at some point. But for now, I'm doing these 5, and I actually, like I said, finished on Sunday. So I don't know what exactly is the next piece. But Kanan's not going away, but Last Padawan was just these 5.
Okay. Yeah, because like I said, the solicitations were a little bit murky on how it's going to play out. Like,
Well,
so I just wanted to clarify that for the viewers.
My understanding is that, I mean, when we started, this I know, when we started, it was just one 5-issue miniseries. And then when the series hit, and everyone was like, ooh, we really like this series, Marvel went to Lucasfilm and said, hey, let's not just do 5 issues, let's make it ongoing. And Lucasfilm liked that idea too, but came up with this notion of bouncing around kind of through the
Sort of
era.
a quantum leap.
Well, it's still Kanan. It's not.
Yeah,
like,
I mean, like it's popping around into this timeline.
But yeah, so so early solicitations probably phrased it just as a miniseries because that's what it was initially. Then they sort of rethought that, and now, as far as I know, the book is ongoing as long as sales hold up.
Yeah, that's great. I know from what I've heard, pre-sales are doing great. So congratulations on that. So Jay, do you have another question, or do you want to go to viewers' questions?
Yeah. Yeah, I want to ask, what can readers and viewers of the original movies and Star Wars Rebels and all those the Star Wars books that are out right now expect to see in your in Kanan? Would it be like any cameos from them, or any little, like when we in Star Wars Rebels we got C-3PO and R2-D2, we got, you know, Leia's father, and, you know, those little touches from the classic Star Wars. Are we going to get anything like that in this?
Well, anyone who knows me knows I'm not big on spoilers. So if I were doing a cameo, I wouldn't tell you. Therefore, if I'm not doing a cameo, I can't tell you, because let me start with that.
Watch and see.
But the main thing is that we want to be, again, consistent with the timeline, consistent with the continuity. So, you know, you can pretty much figure out who would be off limits from that. I mean, obviously, he doesn't meet certain characters who you see him meet for the first time in Rebels, you know,
yeah.
obviously. So what I can say, because this is already in the preview pages, is that we do spend time with him and with his master, Depa Billaba, who appeared in some of the prequel movies, and you know, Depa's a great character, really fun to work with, and the relationship between Caleb and Depa is really interesting to me. And you know, I only barely got to explore it, but it was a lot of fun. Beyond that, I'm just going to sort of not answer the question.
That's all right. Yeah, I had to try. I know because I actually go to X Greg, so like I know how you are. Yeah, that's the website that he does where he answers questions based on Gargoyles and his other previous work. So like I know how you are with giving away spoilers. So I had to try though.
That's fine. And yeah, people can ask questions at my website, which is askgregweisman.com. If they're short questions, they can also reach me on Twitter at Greg_Weisman.
Go check out both. We'll have the link in the description for both.
Yeah. So
yeah, I mean, I check out Greg Weisman all the time.
But keep in mind, on neither of those sites will I give away spoilers. And also, just from a Twitter standpoint, if you've got a big in-depth question, Twitter's not a great place to ask a big in-depth question, because I can't answer a big in-depth question in, you know, you can probably phrase the question in a few amount of characters, but I can't answer it in a few amount of characters. So if it's a big question, askgregweisman.com is a much better place to ask it than Twitter is. If it's a short little question, then I can, you know, I can cover it on Twitter. And I admit I've got a backlog at Ask Greg, but I get to them all eventually.
Awesome. And that's great. That is great.
Also, there's a huge archive at Ask Greg. So your question may already have been asked, and you can go to the AskGregWeisman.com archive. There's a link to it at AskGregWeisman.com. And there are categories, literally like a couple hundred categories. So if you've got a question about Demona from Gargoyles, I probably answered 200 questions about Demona already, and the odds are your question's been asked already. If your question even is more recent, like it's about Star Wars Rebels or Young Justice, there's a whole archive for each of those shows. In fact, Young Justice is actually split into 3 archives, because there's Young Justice Invasion, and Young Justice Legacy. And so, you know, you can check out all 3 of those archives. Again, the odds are I probably already answered your question, and you can find it out there, and not have to wait, you know. So
check out all that stuff. Again, great website, and just go check out Greg Weisman.
That's a great resource. I mean, I watch Gargoyles and you know, Young Justice and all that, and it really adds to it. It's like having almost like having director's cuts at your fingertips. Like you get to get that little extra tidbits here and there. So it's really a great website. It's a great service. I think a lot of fandoms should have something like this, and it's great that you did that for the fans.
Yeah, and I've been doing it for like 17, 18 years now.
Wow. Yeah.
So something like that. So that archive is huge. I mean, a lot of information.
Oh, yeah.
You might find even more information that you weren't even searching. So that's even the best part, probably, about the archive.
Yeah, you can.
So I guess Jay, what's other questions are people asking?
All right. Let's see. Mr. J Comic Reviews, Jeremy wants to know, where in the timeline does Kanan and Leia's Padawan take place? And he also says, will we see any expanded universe characters in the series, which we already asked. So, how far back does it take place in his time, in his life? Like, around how old he is, I guess you could say.
Caleb Doom, which is Kanan's real name, is 14 when the book opens. He's still 14 when it ends. Like I said, it covers about 6 to 8 months of his life. I don't get really specific about how much time has passed, but it's around that figure. Initially, I was thinking it would be like a year in the life, but the way it played out, it felt, no, it's not even that long. It begins, as I said, I think earlier in this interview, it begins literally about 18 hours or so before the Order 66 comes down. And then the rest of the book plays out, I don't mean the first issue, the rest of the 5 issues plays out over the next 6 to 8 months or so of his life. So it's really easy to place, because if you've seen episode 3, you know exactly when Order 66 came down, and that went across the galaxy. So it's pretty easy to place in the timeline.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, Kanan is 14, and I mean, he's not Kanan yet, he's Caleb, but he's 14.
Jay, do we have another question?
Yeah, this is from Twitter. It's, let's see, because that one was already answered. GBA95 Sonic says, what is the series tone? What's the tone to the series? Well, your arc, I should say, because that's all you can actually speak of.
Well, you know, the tone is serious. You know, it's a serious story. You know, if you're doing Order 66, it's not a laugh riot. On the other hand, I firmly believe that, you know, tragedy is offset by comedy. Comedy's funnier, tragedy's involved. And so, you know, I like to think there's some humor in this series, but not a ton. I definitely think it's fun. It's got adventure. It's got all sorts of great stuff. It's got, you know, a handful of brand new characters in it who I hope are, you know, fit right into the Star Wars tradition and are interesting and a lot of fun to spend time with. Hoping that coming out of the series, people are going, hey, I want to know more about that guy, you know, someone who they never met before reading these 5 issues. Tell me what happens in his story next, you know, that kind of thing. But, you know, the tone is Star Wars. It's still very much Star Wars. We take it very seriously, but that doesn't mean we can't have a good time with it, too.
Very cool. So, Jay, what questions, well, yeah, I think we're up to you, Jay. So, Jay, what questions do you have?
Actually, this is what I just thought of. All right, Disney's really going into their bank vault, I guess you could say, because they're coming out with the Darkwing Duck comic book. They're bringing back DuckTales. These are 2 shows that were on Disney Afternoon, which is where Gargoyles came from. Have you thought about giving them a pitch for a new Gargoyle series or comic book?
I've never given up on Gargoyles, and I'm constantly pitching it in one form or another. There have been ongoing discussions about a Gargoyles comic book. I wish I could announce right here and now that, and we're doing it, but I can't. There's no deal in place for that, but the discussions are ongoing, and I'm hopeful that, you know, at some point I will be able to say, yeah, more Gargoyles, one way or another. You know, the Gargoyles fans are the best fans in the world, as far as I'm concerned. I'm biased, but there you have it. You know, there's nothing, they've done a great job at keeping my interest high in the property. I've tried to reciprocate in that, and so, you know, there's literally nothing I'd rather do than in this business than Morgard was.
It's such a great series. It really is. I think it's a series before its time. Truly was. You have more questions, Jay, or you want me to go?
You can go, okay.
So my question is, with this first issue, of Star Wars Kanan, do you need to be an ultra Star Wars fan to read it, or is it new reader friendly?
I think it's new reader friendly. I mean, it certainly helps to know. The more you know about Star Wars, the more you'll appreciate certain aspects of it. But the story's pretty straightforward, and everything you need to know is there in the book. Now, you may read stuff and go, I'm curious about that, and then want to go out and watch more episodes of Rebels, or go see episode 3 of the movies, or go watch some Clone Wars. And that's great if in reading the book it makes you curious about these other aspects of the larger Star Wars story. I'm moving my hands and realize that I'm out of frame. But anyway, but I don't think you need that. In other words, anything you need to appreciate Star Wars Kanan is within Star Wars Kanan itself. It's just that if I'm doing my job right, it's better the more you know, and it's also hopefully the kind of thing that makes a newbie intrigued enough to seek out more stories.
That's great. Also, you're very known for having strong female characters in your shows. So I know Depa's going to be in this book. Can you tell us about her as a strong female role? Will there be other strong female roles in the book?
Again, I don't want to spoil too much, but Depa's definitely an important part of this story. I don't want to make it, this is Caleb's story, so I don't want to make it sound like this is Depa's story. It's not. But her influence on Caleb runs throughout the entire 5 issues. And I think I tried very hard to drop hints about Depa, intriguing sort of bits that I think people will, particularly people who are fans of expanded universe material, will appreciate. But I don't want to pretend it's about her. It's not about her. But I do think she's a very strong character. I do like writing female characters, strong female characters, and she's a strong character, and her presence is definitely felt here. But this is really Caleb's story, not her story. As to other characters, again, I don't want to spoil things. So.
Awesome. So Jay, what questions do you have?
I actually have a follow-up for that. Will we see the scene where you said it was mentioned in Star Wars Rebels, where she says those words to Caleb? Run now. Like, will we see that scene in your art?
Again, I don't want to give a spoiler. So,
okay.
But we are seeing Order 66 come down. So that more or less answers your question without spoiling it.
All right.
Very cool.
All right, cool. From Twitter, we have, what is the top comic book you would like to work on? And that's from CBS397 at Twitter.
Well, again, if I had my absolute preference, it would be Gargoyle. But I'd love to, I'd love to get back to Young Justice. We pitched DC doing a book called Earth 16, which is just not specifically Young Justice, that is the team, but just a book that would be set in the Young Justice universe. It would give us the flexibility. If we wanted to tell a Red Tornado story, we could tell a Red Tornado story. If we wanted to tell a story about the team, we could do that. If we wanted to tell a Batman and Robin story, or a Batman and Robins plural story, we could do that. Just set within the Young Justice universe, which we called Earth 16, that Brandon and I and Kevin Hobbs created with Phil Barassa and the whole team. I'd love to do more stories set in that universe. Love to do a Spectacular Spider-Man book set in that version of the Spider-Man universe. You know, a lot of this sounds like he just wants to go back and do the things he's already done, and the answer is yeah, that's really what I'd like to do. I mean, I had so many untold stories for all 3 of those series, for example, that, you know, it'd be great to go in and do comics on those. If you're not talking about stuff I've already done, I'm a huge superhero fan. There's hardly a superhero character at either Marvel or DC, at least certainly not one that was created before the 90s, before like 1991, that I don't love and wouldn't just love to do. And, you know, I really love to do more Kanan. I'd love to do Zeb. I'd love to do a book on Sabine. I'd really love to do a book on Hera. You know, none of these decisions are up to me because I don't own any of these characters, not even Gargoyles. But God knows I'd love to do it.
All right. From Jeremy.
Black Canary.
Oh yeah, you still had that Black Canary. I know you love her because you wrote a short story for her, right? It was in.
When I was like 21, I think, which was again 30 years ago, I wrote a Black Canary miniseries for DC that never got published, and you know, it wouldn't fit current continuity, but I do love the character quite a bit, and I love Supergirl. I do love female characters. I love writing female characters. So, it would be great.
So I have to ask then, you know, the live action Supergirl is coming out. Arrow has Black Canary.
I was just going.
Yeah.
That just read my mind.
So would you ever be interested, if obviously they came to you, to write an episode for them? And also, are you watching like Arrow and those type of shows?
The answer is I would be thrilled to write live action superheroes, period, especially something like Supergirl. I tried very hard to get my foot in the door on Arrow. And we're talking about, you know, 3-4 years ago when they first started up, and I couldn't even get a job interview. The truth is that I'm viewed as a animation writer, and I've found, for me at least, I don't want to speak for anyone else, but for me at least, found it very difficult to get people to consider me for live action. I have been watching Arrow and Flash. I'm currently watching television that aired in mid-January. That's how far behind I am. I'm all caught up. I caught up on the first 2 seasons of Arrow, and I've seen all the Arrows that aired from September to December of last year. But the last episode of Arrow I watched was the episode, it was just a couple days ago, I watched the episode where they all think he's dead again.
Okay.
So I'm behind, and I'm at the same point on Flash. I'm on the same point on Gotham. I'm at the same point on Constantine. Am I skipping something? What am I leaving out?
I think that's it for now.
Oh,
Yeah, the only other one that's on right now is Zombie.
I'm basically in January stuff now on all those shows. I am way behind on my TV viewing, and my DVRs, of which I have 2, are literally busting at the seams at this point. I'm in actual danger of losing stuff because they're both so full. I'm barely staying ahead of my DVRs erasing stuff.
Man. Oh, Mike, well, you are up to like a pretty good point of Arrow. What do you think of their portrayal of Black Canary, since you love the character so much, and they're doing, personally I really like their journey for Arrow's Black Canary. It's very different, but what do you think so far?
Well, there are 2 Black Canaries on the show. There's Sarah and Laurel, and that doesn't even count the fact that their mother is Dinah, who for me is Black Canary. I'm at a stage with Laurel where it's too soon for me to, I mean, again, you guys may have more information than I do, but it's too soon for me to sort of evaluate what I think of her as Black Canary. Sarah was interesting as Black Canary, um, and but she's gone now. So I guess I got to put a pin in that question and sort of say, look, when I catch up a little more, maybe I'll have a better answer. But
I'll have
I
to ask you. My last Arrow question, I promise, but I'm an ultra Thea fan, and I gotta ask, what do you think of Thea? I feel like, do you like her character where she's going? Because you have a lot of information about her at the point you're up to now. So.
You know, Thea's really interesting. There have been moments over the seasons where Thea, I'll admit, got on my nerves a bit. You know, it's not that it isn't human to want things both ways, but it can get tiresome to watch a character who wants things both ways. But she's in a really interesting spot now. But the question is, again, I'm just so far behind. I don't know where they're going with it. I don't want you to tell me. I don't want spoilers.
No, trust me, I won't spoil it for you.
But you know, I don't really know where it's going. The fact that she can fight now, obviously, is going to make her an interesting character, put her in different situations, and you know, the whole Merlin thing. Well, I don't know where they're going with it yet. It could wind up being really fun and exciting. So I'm looking forward to seeing it play out. I just, you know, I'm too early in the game, I guess.
Well, there has been rumors, and since you are the creator of Young Justice, there's been, and this has been like since the show started, or not since the show started, but at least season 3 started. There's rumors that they think, a lot of people think she's based on Artemis. What's your thoughts on that as being, you know, the creator of Young Justice?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, that's flattering, but that sounds to me like fans reading stuff in. It seems to me, I don't even know that I've got any reason to think that the people doing Arrow have seen Young Justice, let alone that they're basing Thea on her. I think that would be kind of arrogant on my part to assume that. I don't see anything about Thea per se that immediately says to me, ooh, that's very Artemis-esque, you know, other than, I guess, the basic connection that her dad's a villain and Artemis's dad was a villain. But that's, in and of itself, that feels a little generic unless the specifics got more in line. Certainly Malcolm Merlin and Sportsmaster, certainly the Merlin from Arrow and the Sportsmaster from Young Justice have almost nothing at all in common.
Yeah.
So it's not like you're going, well, wow, I really see Sportsmaster and Malcolm Merlin, so I really see, you know, and the whole thing with the mom is completely different, and the whole, you know, Artemis came from a very, at best, at most, lower middle class, if not worse than that. And Thea is coming in every way, shape, and form from the upper class. And all 3 of Thea's parents are all upper class, very wealthy individuals, whereas Artemis was someone who, you know, at best was lower middle class.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your insight on that. I completely agree with you. I've been saying the same thing for that too. But I seen an interview recently where Willa Holland's like, who plays Thea, she's like, oh yeah, I've heard the 3 names that are coming up, and it's Cheshire, Mia Dearden, and Artemis. So I think even she knows those are the 3 that a lot of fans are talking about. But I'm going to turn it over to Jay. What other questions do we have, or what questions do you have?
Jeremy asked a couple of questions here, but I'm going to go through it because some of them we've already discussed. So you worked on Young Justice. Everyone knows that. We all love it. There's another team that's on Marvel's end of the spectrum called Young Avengers. Would you ever think about writing for that?
You know, I got a mortgage to pay, and I got a kid in college and another kid who's starting college in the fall. I like working. If Marvel or anyone offered me Young Avengers, I would jump at the chance. Just on that basis alone, you know, it's the kind of thing where, you know, like I said earlier, there are a lot of franchises I'd love to work in. So I guess the short answer is yes.
I mean, I would love to see that too. I would like to see your take on those characters. That would be really cool.
I would love to see it too.
Tanya asked us a question that he's asked us before, and we've basically told him we don't know. So you may be able to give a little bit more information, but it's more about your personal opinion of the expanded universe of Star Wars right now has been retconned out of existence. Like, what came before, they're cutting it out, and they're just going with what's like in the movies and what's in the books currently, like that stuff, the current stuff, since Marvel got their rights to it. Well, Disney, I should say. What is your thoughts on that? Being like all those other novels and videos and everything like that that came out after the original 6 movies. What do you think about that?
Well, I mean, fundamentally, the first thing I think about it is those stories still exist. You can still get them. You can still read them. You can still enjoy them. They've been saying they've been retconned out. I don't think is accurate. Ultimately, in those days, the arbiter was George himself, and George never felt they were retconned in. You know, he was fine with those things existing, but he never believed that they were something that he had to be faithful for. So I like the approach that they've taken, calling them Star Wars Legends. It also allows the current people working on it, the Lucasfilm group, to pick and choose from the expanded universe and say, ooh, we like this. We like the Inquisitors, so we're going to put the Inquisitors in Star Wars Rebels. So that was something from the expanded universe. Again, I'm pointing with a hand that is off screen, but as if the Inquisitors were over that way.
Maybe they are. We don't know. We can't see.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, but the Inquisitors were something from the expanded universe that is now canon. Before, it was debatable whether it was canon. Now you know it's canon. Now maybe every detail about the Inquisitors from the expanded universe won't wind up being canon. I don't know the answer to that. But that's just an example. There's certainly stuff from the expanded universe that I have in my head that plays into Kanan the Last Padawan. Absolutely. But that doesn't mean that just because there are a few details from that play into Last Padawan, doesn't mean that everything from the expanded universe plays in. And let's be honest about one thing about the expanded universe. It's almost literally impossible to make all of it canon because some of it contradicts each other. You know, there was
I
so
said
much
that on the previous show.
since 1976. There's so much expanded universe material, and not all of it is consistent. And I'm not arguing about whether or not it's good or bad, or some of the stories were great and some of them weren't. That's a whole separate issue as to quality. I'm not even talking about that. I'm saying that flat out, if you just look at the details of it, a lot of it's consistent, but a lot of it, not a lot, but at least some of it is not. And so you literally couldn't make all of it fit. Now, I know there are a lot of fans, particularly before Disney brought it, that were jumping through hoops to try to make it all fit together, you know, and with some success sometimes and with less success other times. But if they're being honest, it doesn't all fit. So I actually like Lucasfilm's approach now. Again, they have tremendous respect for the expanded universe. They didn't wipe it out. They just said these are legends. And some of those legends will turn out to be true, and some of them won't. And that's the nature of legends. They have a basis in fact, but they aren't necessarily part of the canon. But what you now know absolutely is the 6 movies, Star Wars The Clone Wars, Star Wars Rebels, and the Episode 7, and the comics that are coming out now, and New Dawn, and the books that are coming out now, those are canon. And from this point on, people, this Lucasfilm Story Group is paying attention and making sure that all this canon works together, and it'll be consistent. And some of that expanded universe stuff will come back in, and some of it won't. But all of it's still there to enjoy. No one is wiping out the memories of fans that love that stuff. It's still there. The stories are there.
Yeah, I totally agree with the approach too. It just makes everything a lot more simple, especially for people that might become fans of Star Wars in Episode 7. It's easier to go back, and I'm sure a lot of people will become fans of Star Wars after Episode 7 because it's going to be a huge movie. So we're getting to the hour mark, so we're going to answer a couple more fan questions. I'll have one more question. Jay will have one more question. Then we're going to start wrapping it up. So, Jay, what other fan questions do we have here? A couple more.
All right. Sonic the Hedgehog asks a simple question. Do you think you'll write movies well?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Do you think you'll write good in movies? So I put it more grammatically. Do you think you'll write movies well?
So would you like to write a screenplay, pretty much?
Yeah. Would you be a good movie writer?
Well, I've written screenplays. I think they're good. None of them have been made. That's a whole separate issue. I don't think they weren't made because they were bad. I think that there are all sorts of reasons why movies get made and don't get made, and so I think if someone gave me a shot, that yeah, I could be. I've written good comic books. I've written good TV shows. I like to think I've written 2 good novels. So I like to think I could write good movies, but it's really, not something for me to judge. Someone else will have to judge it. But I think yes. I guess the answer is yes.
Okay, so Jay.
Another thing from Science the Hedgehog asks, have you ever wanted to explore some LGBT characters?
Well, I have explored LGBT characters. The problem is that for the shows that I've worked on, I'm not allowed to say that they're LGBT characters. Though I have said it. For example, Lexington and Gargoyles, I've said it often enough that it's not a big secret. I consider that character to be gay. And we tried to write him that way consistently. Even though we couldn't be objective about it. I wish we could. I really wish we could. But if I'd insisted on it, they just would have fired me. And I felt and there's an element of cowardice to that. I won't try to soft sell it, but I felt I was serving the community and the world better by being there and writing the character consistently than by fighting for a battle I knew I would lose. And hoping that who Lexington was as a character and who other characters I've written that I've considered to be LGBT, or at least LGB, I don't think I have ever written a T yet. Which is not a judgment. It's just, I don't think I have. I'm trying to think, but I don't think I have. Unless you count metaphors. But the characters I've written, and there have been more than one who are LGBT, I'd love to have been able to sort of come out and say that's who they were, get them out of the closet. But I asked as recently as a couple of years ago on Young Justice, I asked, are we allowed to do this? And the answer came back no. But I'm hoping that we're moving forward as a human race, and pretty soon we'll get to the point where we are allowed to just be open about that stuff. And in the meantime, the least I can do, and I guess it is the least, but at least I'm doing it, is writing those characters with consistency so that, and I think I've had at least a little success, allowing people to identify with those characters and understand who those characters are, even if I can't be objective about it.
Well, my question, I guess my follow-up to that is that just recently, probably a year ago, Legend of Korra, which was a Nickelodeon show, but then aired on the internet on Nick.com, was able to have a LGBT character for the main character and one of the supportings. Even though like they didn't fully outset it, it was like very much implied, and it was that was the last scene of the show and the series. So do you think something like that is making animation more possible to have LGBT characters? I don't know if you heard about that or not, but
I did hear about it. I think it's very cool. I have not seen it yet. I've only recently, again, I'm so far behind on my watching. My son has seen all of it, but only recently he and I finished watching Avatar: The Last Airbender.
mm-hmm.
We haven't started Korra yet. He's seen all of it already, but I haven't seen any of it. So I don't know Korra. Never met her, so to speak, because I haven't even seen episode 1 of that show yet.
Yeah.
But I think it's very cool. I certainly haven't seen how it was executed, but it's definitely a step in the right direction, whatever they did, and I haven't seen it. It's, by definition, a step in the right direction. I don't know if it's much different from some of the stuff I've done. It may be a whole level more advanced, and that's great. Or it may be very similar to the stuff I've done. I just don't know. But until we get to the day when, you know, 2 men or 2 women can kiss, I'm not talking about hardcore sex on kids' television, but, you know, can have a chaste kiss or something like that and not have everyone go ballistic over it or get fired over it, we haven't truly, you know, broken through. But I do feel that incrementally we've taken positive steps. And it sounds like Korra is another incremental positive step. But again, I haven't seen it myself.
Yeah.
And again, the reason for that is because I am so far behind on watching everything.
I'm sure it's on your DVR.
Yeah, at least that's not on my DVR. But that's, you know, watch that by different means. But, you know, I do plan on getting to Korra eventually. I loved Avatar, loved it, so I'm looking forward to watching Korra, but haven't had the time yet.
Yeah, especially if you're, you know, you are a fan of strong female characters. I think you'll really enjoy Korra. It's a great series. So I think we have one last fan question that we have here. We might have more, but just time-wise, there's only one last one. And then me and Jay will ask one last question, then we'll start wrapping things up. So Jay, do we have that last one or not?
Yeah. What are your thoughts on Spider-Gwen? This comes from Sonic the Hedgehog also.
You know, I don't know it. I've got no thoughts because I just have not read any of it.
Okay.
On one level, the idea is appealing, but I've just got no actual knowledge of it. So.
Awesome. So Jay, what is your last question?
My last question is: do you have anything that you have coming up within the Star Wars universe, other than Kanan? Do you have anything like slotted for anything else, like maybe consulting on season 2 or anything like that?
Nope, just Kanan. Right now, I've got love to do more with Star Wars, but I didn't work on season 2 at all. But you know, Dave Filoni and I exchanged emails today. He read issue 1 of Kanan and wrote me a very nice email congratulating me on it, and so you know, we just chatted. Things are good, but no, I don't have any current plans to do more Star Wars, but I'm way open to it, so anytime they want me, they know where to find me.
Cool. So my last question is, for aspiring writers out there that want to work in television, what is some advice that you have? Just, again, not just writing in general, but just breaking into the industry.
Well, the first piece of advice I always have is to write. It sounds obvious, but a lot of people say, I'd really love to be a writer. I'm like, okay, what have you written? I haven't actually written anything yet, but I know I'd really like to write. I'm like, well, look, start writing first. write a script. It's not hard, particularly in this internet age, to get the format for a script. That's not hard to do. You can do that online.
Even books. There's a lot of books out there, too.
A lot of books. It's really easy to do. Write a script. Put it in a drawer for 3 weeks. Once you finished it, put it in a drawer for 3 weeks. Don't look at it. Start a second script. When you finish the second script, put that in a drawer. Pull out the first script and look at it and see if you still like it. Rewrite it. Then start a third script. Finish the third script, put that in a drawer. Go back to your second script. Start a fourth script. Let me tell you something. You're not going to get good till you've written 10. 10. That's a lot. But by the time you've written 10, you actually should be pretty good, if you're ever going to be good. Make sure you proofread. It's fine to show these scripts to your friends to get feedback. Don't show them to any pros until you get to the point where you feel confident, because there's such a thing in this business call it poisoning the water. You send a script when you're a newbie and you're not very good, and you send it to someone and say, "Here, read my script." Not a buddy, but a pro. And the pro reads the script and goes, "Well, this is kind of crap." Well, 6 months later, after you've written 10 scripts, now you've gotten the hang of this thing, and you're like, want to send a new script to the pro, and you're like, "Hey, this one's much better." They don't care. They've read you already. So don't immediately rush out and send your stuff to people. Make sure you're good before you're doing that.
Yeah.
Make sure
one
you
chance to make a good first impression.
If I read a sample from someone and there's a typo in it, that's fine. If there are 2 typos, I immediately start to get suspicious. If I get to a 3rd typo in a script, I chuck it. Because if they don't care enough, anyone can make a mistake. 1 typo, even 2, fine. But if they don't care enough to proofread this thing, why should I care enough to read it?
Yeah.
So learn to proofread, and that's not just about spell check. I taught at USC, freshman composition. Very first essay that we taught it was write an essay about what you expect out of your college education. I got, out of the 50 papers I read, at least 15 of them were about what to expect from their collage education. Because, they spell check collage, but it's a real word. So the spell check didn't catch it as an error. So you got to learn to proofread this stuff yourself. And if you can't, look, I'm a little dyslexic. I've taught myself to proofread. But if you can't do it, give it to your wife, give it to your friend, give it to someone who can. If that's beyond your ability, find someone to help you who can do that. But don't turn in something to a pro that's full of typos and proofreading errors and bad punctuation and bad spelling. Do not do it. You will poison the water. And even if you figure it out later, no one will want to read you again. So be careful. My third piece of advice after writing, proofreading, is if you're really serious, move to where the work is. And for most of the industry, that means Los Angeles. There are all sorts of anecdotal stories about people who break in big even though they're living in Minnesota or living in Timbuktu or whatever. Fine. But this is a game of percentages. You've got to play the percentages, and that means you go to where the work is. The odds of you breaking in long distance are incredibly slim. Not impossible, but incredibly slim. So if you're serious that this is what you want to do for a living, move to LA, maybe New York. Maybe there are a couple other places, maybe in Canada, where you can get some work on an ongoing basis. But fundamentally, 90% of it's in Los Angeles.
Yeah, and New York is growing a little bit, but I agree. Los Angeles has so much work. But New York, at least it's trying a little bit now.
And, you know, again, it's a game of percentages. If you know people in New York, you've got the connections, and you think you can break in there because you know people, great. But if you don't know anyone in either city, why would you go to New York, where there's this much work, when you can go to LA where there's this much work? And again, I'm not saying this because I'm pro LA. I am, because I grew up here. I'm from LA. But that's not why I'm saying it. It's just the fact. This is where most of the work is. Even shows that are produced in New York, most of them are still written in LA. Shows that are produced in Canada, like Arrow, for example, written in LA. You know, and there are exceptions, but again, you're playing the percentages, that's the thing. The fourth piece of advice I have is to read. And don't just read comic books that are coming out today. You know, don't just read novels that are coming out today. Go back and read the classics. Read Shakespeare. Read Faulkner. Read Dickens. Read Homer. Read Beowulf. Read Gilgamesh. Go read the stuff that the other people are basing their stuff on. Don't read my stuff. I mean, do read my stuff. Read Reign of the Ghosts and Spirits of Ash and Foam. But don't just read those. Go back and read the classics. You know, figure out how people tell stories in an archetypal sense. Read newspapers. Sit down with an actual newspaper and read it cover to cover, daily. I do, even now. Go through and understand current events, understand how that is reflected in history. Read history. When we were doing Gargoyles, we started off with a story where we said, let's have some Vikings attack this Scottish castle in 994. We picked 994 because it was exactly 1,000 years before 1994, which was at the time when our series was set, because it was 1994. And we had Vikings attack because Vikings are cool. Afterwards, we did some research and found out that we had just been dumb lucky that Vikings were attacking the west coast of Scotland in that era. We'd gotten it right by accident, but since we had gotten it right by accident, from that point on, we decided to make sure we continued to get it right. So we did a lot of research, and you know what? We got great stories out of that research. The true history of Macbeth, not Shakespeare's version of Macbeth, but the true history of Macbeth is a fascinating story. And so we put it in City of Stone, in Gargoyles. There's great stories out of history, just amazing stories. You'd be stunned at how tremendous history is. So read history. Even if you decide you don't want to do a period piece, you want to do something in the present, you can get a great story out of the historic something or other and say, yeah, but I'm going to take that story and set it in the present. You know, there's great stuff to be had there. So you need to read like a fiend, like an addict.
And would you also say watching a lot of different older shows and newer shows, especially if you want to be a TV writer, do you think that's also something you would have to do? I
do. Go back and watch classic television. I am right now going through the Andy Griffith Show. A show I would recommend to anybody is Hill Street Blues. All of television, all of modern, this sort of modern golden age of television that we're at comes out of Hill Street Blues. Without Hill Street Blues, none of those shows exist. There's no Breaking Bad without Hill Street Blues. There's no Game of Thrones without Hill Street Blues. There's no even Arrow without Hill Street Blues. Go back and watch Hill Street Blues. Go back and watch Northern Exposure. Go back and watch St. Elsewhere. If you like comedy, go back and watch the first 5 seasons of Cheers. Go back and watch Taxi. Go back and watch The Honeymooners. Watch I Love Lucy. These shows are great, not just because, well, they are, but because, and not just because they've stood the test of time, but because they have lessons to teach about storytelling.
Yeah, definitely.
When we were doing Spectacular Spider-Man, I went back and I had read all this stuff before, but I went back and reread all the old Lee Ditko and Lee Romita Sr. Spider-Man comic. because I wanted to infuse myself with the original product, not just the product of all the writers and artists and editors who came on Spider-Man afterwards, though I read a lot of that too. But I wanted to make sure I got down to the nitty-gritty of who Spider-Man was, so that meant going back to the source, going back to Stan and Steve and Stan and John. And I think for Spectacular that served us really well. When we did Young Justice, I went back to the source. I went back and looked at old Robin comics from the 40s. I went back and looked at the original Teen Titans comics from the 60s and early 70s. I went back and looked at the original Young Justice comics that Peter David did. Not just the stuff that was coming out now, though I read a lot of that too, again. But go back and look at what defined these things in the first place. And again, when I started on Rebels, the very first thing I did was I went back and watched the original 6 movies. Starting with episode 4, not starting with episode 1. I went back and looked at episode 4, 5, and 6, and then watched 1, 2, and 3. Now again, I'd seen those movies before, but I went back to make sure I infused myself with the source material. And I think that's really important. One of the movies that Dave Filoni, when we were working on Rebels, talked about all the time was Empire of the Sun, a Steven Spielberg film that he and Carrie Hart are huge fans of. And so I went back and watched Empire of the Sun. I'd seen it when it first came out, but I hadn't seen it since, and that was, decades ago. So, I went back and watched that movie. But again, I don't just recommend watching movies from the last 30 years. Go back and watch Casablanca. Go back and watch some of the great films from the 30s and 40s. There's a lot of great storytelling out there, and sometimes people get very tied up in what's out now, and they're not going back to see what the stuff that's out now is based on. Go back to the original.
That is great advice. Definitely great advice. Thank you so much. So as we wrap this up, is there anything you want to mention about Star Wars and future projects that you would like to mention?
Star Wars Kanan comes out April 1st. Very excited for people to finally be able to see the whole first issue. Very excited for them in the months that follow to see the next 4 issues. That is issues 2 through 5. I am working on a couple things that I'm really excited about, and unfortunately I'm just not able to talk about them yet. One of them I'd be able to talk about in a week.
Oh, man.
Another one I'm not sure when I'd get the go-ahead to talk about, but hopefully soon. And then again, just I'm like a broken record. I'm just going to ask people, please check out Reign of the Ghosts and Spirits of Ash and Foam. I really do think you'll love these books.
Awesome. So this is us wrapping up the show. Jay, do you have any last-minute things you want to mention?
Just make sure that you check out comicfrontline.com, and this episode will be up on iTunes, I believe, on Monday. So you can actually download it on iTunes, and you can listen to it wherever you are. And check out the rest of Frontline Live episodes on iTunes. Also, those links will be in descriptions and tweeted out and everything this week.
Awesome. And I want to thank Greg so much for coming on. We had a blast talking to you. Hopefully we could do this in the future soon, either for your books, whatever future projects you have. Yeah, so thank you so much for coming on.
I'm happy to do it. I'm happy to come back. So yeah, if you check out the books and you want to come and just do one and talk about Reign of the Ghosts, I'd love to do that, believe me.
Awesome.
So.
Yes, we definitely plan on doing that.
We will.
For me, it takes a little while to read novels, but I definitely will get through that. I'm excited to get through your novels. They sound really interesting. I love all your work. So once we all finish, we'll plan something for that and whatever future projects that are going to be announced in the future. So thank you guys so much for joining us. Again, even if this is not live, comment. Of course, pick up Star Wars this coming Wednesday. Pick it up. I know I'll be picking it up. Jay will be picking it up. We'll be reviewing it here. I'll review it on my channel. Pick up this book. Thank you guys so much. This is Comic Frontline. Hope you guys had a great time. Again, thank you to Greg Weisman for joining us, and we will all see you later. Bye.
Bye.